Hi, I'm Christopher Horan, and I want to show you one of my favorite hip flexor stretches. The hip flexors are the muscles that are on the front of your hips that can get in a shortened position from too much time in the seated position, either at your desk or in the car or watching TV. So the stretch that we're going to do is going to work to open up the front of your hips. A classic stretch that you'll see a lot of people do is to dive forward to try to lengthen through here. One of the problems I have with that is that it puts too much strain into your lumbar spine, your low back, and not enough stretch on the front of your hip. So what I like to do is, instead of arching with the low back, is to have the person tuck their tail just a little bit. So you're going to take your pelvis and tuck your tail just a little bit between your legs, and then flex your glute to send your hip forward. And then you'll want to hold that for anywhere between 20 and 30 seconds while you're constantly contracting your glute muscles on the backside here. You can always touch just to make sure that it's contracting appropriately. Then you can relax, take a few breaths, tuck your tail again, and then contract your glute to send your hip forward. What we don't want to do is to keep your hips not tucked and then overarch through your low back, because when that's the case, all you're really doing is putting a huge strain into your lumbar spine, which is not the goal here. So as seen from the front, take whichever leg that you want to stretch, tuck your tail a smidgen, and then contract your glute to send your hip forward. You can also assist by contracting your hamstring here to kind of draw yourself forward. You can put an emphasis on your groin muscles by putting this other leg a little wider and kind of dipping in towards your midline, or opposite, you could go a little bit more towards your tensor fasciae lata muscles by dropping your hip out a little bit. But the way to get the most even stretch is to keep your knee and a hip in alignment, tuck your tail, contract your glute, and send your hip forward. As I mentioned, you'll want to keep your glute contracted for about 20 to 30 seconds, and then relax, give yourself a break, tuck your tail, contract your glute, hip forward, and you're good to go. You should be doing it any day, anytime you spend a chunk of time seating, to help open up the front of your hips and get them so that you can be much more length on the front side.